Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Ms. Espinosa and I teach kindergarten in Texas, and in today's video, I will be walking you through how I prepare for my parent-teacher conferences. I know that it can be especially nerve-wracking if it's your first time having to do them and maybe you're unsure of what to cover, but I will go into detail of how I structure my meeting and what resources I use. So as you're watching, please take a second to like this video and subscribe for future videos, and let's get started. Tip number 1 would be to have communication with the parents before an actual conference with them. And I think that the easiest way is through establishing a communication platform with the parents. Find a way to keep in contact with parents, especially if you don't see them at dismissal. Some teachers have a weekly or a monthly newsletter, a calendar. Some teachers prefer an app, some teachers prefer email, or maybe a combination of the aforementioned. But whatever you decide, make it clear at the beginning of the school year what your contact hours are. I highly advise not to give your parents or your students your real phone number. I have a teacher phone number that I've had since my first year of teaching, and it's just a free Google Voice number. And when you download the Google Voice app, it lets you pick a phone number and you can text and call from that phone number. There is also an option in the app settings called Do Not Disturb that allows for phone calls not to be received. They don't come through, and I honestly just keep it on that setting and I only use the text feature. But my primary method of parent communication is through an app called Talking Points, which is a free app that can translate in over 100 languages, and parents don't need to download it. It is the best thing ever. I send pictures or short videos to parents of their child, and I just celebrate their work and their progress. And it literally takes a couple of minutes for you to do that, and it helps that child feel proud of their work, and parents love getting those positive messages about their child. If we do anything cute in the classroom, like a cute craft, I will send a quick picture and parents love it. So I also make sure that at dismissal time that I'm talking with parents and building those relationships and just commenting on anything positive that their child did that day. Tip number 2 would be to be flexible when you're beginning to schedule those conferences. So I want to start off by saying that my school does not have like a mandatory time frame to complete our conferences. So we have a lot of flexibility on when we hold our conferences, and I'm very thankful for that. I know I've seen teachers that like they'll have 1 or 2 days where they need to just knock all of them out, and I think that is so stressful. I really space mine out. So depending on my group that school year, like I would schedule them in October or November, and then again in February or in March. And by October, like I have a really good idea of what my students' needs are and how they're adjusting to the school year. And then February is a really good middle of the year update for the parents, and then I let them know what their child's end of year goals are. And when I begin scheduling my conferences, I print a blank calendar with times. I don't schedule any before school starts, but I've also never had a parent request a meeting that early. And I do have my planning time in the morning chunk of my day, so I schedule 1 or 2 during my planning time. But for the most part, I will have 2 or 3 conferences at a time after school, and then they take between 15 to 30 minutes. So this is the simple conference schedule that I created on Word, and I write down just Monday through Friday, the actual date that I will hold the conference, and then I'll have about 4 slots. Like I said, I'll have 1 morning slot and then a couple in the afternoon, but then I have some that are blank. And I do send a note home the day before reminding the parent of the conference, and my parents usually always show up. And my reminder is just half a sheet that says, this is a reminder that you are meeting with Ms. Espinosa on March the 7th at 8:20 a.m. If you cannot make it, please contact me as soon as possible. And another thing that I do want to share is that I do not meet with all of my parents. Like I've never had a school year where I have met with every single one of my parents. And that is largely because I teach in a very multicultural community and my family speaks so many languages, and having nobody to translate if the parent speaks limited English is a very big barrier. I've also noticed that sometimes like only the fathers will speak English, but they work so late and we're just not able to meet. So depending on that parent availability, I try to be as flexible as possible, but I have never met with a parent like past 5 p.m. So be flexible, but have those boundaries. Tip number 3 is to have your handouts and your documentation ready. So some handouts that I like to have ready are my daily schedule, my list of kinder goals, that child student data folder, and notebooks, and then my parent-teacher conference form that I created. And I do have the child present during the conference so that the parent and the child are aware and on the same page about expectations. And there is accountability for that child especially. In that initial conference, I like to start off by walking parents through what our day looks like. We have such a busy day, and it really gives parents an understanding of what our day looks like and how hard we work as a class. So I go into detail about each component of our schedule. And when I talk about independent work time, once I get to that component, I explain that during that time, students typically complete about 3 activities while I meet with my small group, and I explain how important that small group time is for the children and for the rest of the children to stay focused. I emphasize that it's the only time during the day where I can really work one-on-one with your child. And I also mention if their child is able to stay focused or if we're having issues during that time, and what skills their child is working on. And it's a really good time to show work samples of what their child has been working on. So once I finish talking about our schedule and the child work samples, I go over the child's data folder, and I just continue to talk about their child's progress. And I do have a paper assessment that helps me keep track of how they're doing with very basic skills like letter recognition, letter sounds, writing their name, how many sight words they can identify, if they can identify numbers, if they can write numbers. And this assessment is also a free download in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So if you're interested, I will link it. So after going over that assessment, then I go over the list of kinder goals, which I love this resource from keeping my kinders busy. It's a little chart that details the 20 most important skills that students should ideally master by the end of the school year, and the students color each star as they achieve each skill. And this resource is also editable, and again, I just highly recommend it if you teach kinder. And there is a pre-K version, so I will link both in the description. So this is how my students keep track of their goals throughout the year. So we refer to this many times throughout the school year as I am assessing. And I explain to the parent that whichever star is not colored, and that means they did not achieve it, it's okay, but really focus on that during the summer. So the child does take this home at the end of the school year, and I do make a copy for the first grade teacher that will be receiving them for the following year. So tip number 4 would be to use positive language and to offer solutions. So as I am going through the schedule and the academic expectations, I comment on things that their child does well. So I may say, I noticed that Sammy is very helpful when we are transitioning and we're cleaning up. He is so quick to clean up, and then he goes and helps others clean up their mess. Or if he sees a mess in the classroom, he goes and cleans it up. And I am so appreciative, and I always thank him for his help. So just any positive behaviors that I can think about with that child, I will share with the parent. Some children act very differently at home than they do at school. And sometimes the kids will actually behave better with the teacher than at home, and it will really shock parents, but in a very positive and great way. Now, when it comes to addressing any concerns that I have, I might say, I noticed that Sammy only brings chips and cupcakes and cookies to eat, and that's usually the only thing that he eats throughout the day. So I know that he doesn't like school food. Would it be possible for him to bring food from home? Or I might say, I've noticed that Sammy comes in very, very sleepy in the mornings and does not complete his morning work. Does he get enough sleep at night? What does your evening and morning routine like? Do you have any babies at home? So state what you have noticed with that child and inquire as to why that behavior might be and how to improve or change that behavior. And at this point in the conference, I also ask the parents if they have any concerns, and I start writing the things down that we are talking about. And again, I am giving the parents suggestions or activities that they can do at home to help their child and to address what they're struggling with, and that's something that I write on the form. And something I was very intentional about in creating this form was to include positive language. I also kept it very simple. I write down the teacher name, student name, parent name, the date, and then I list the strengths or improvements for that child. So this form and the calendar sign up and the reminder notes are for sale in my Teachers Pay Teachers store. So I hope that's helpful to you. So I do let parents know that I will make a copy for them and I will send it home with their child the next day. And that's kind of a wrap for my conferences. And before I move on to the next tip, I do want to mention that if you have difficulty with a child and you're a little bit nervous to address that parent alone, I would ask an administrator, a counselor, or another teacher to support you, especially if that other person has dealt with the student as well. And lastly, tip number 5 is to keep organized documentation and write down next steps. So the number of conferences is definitely going to depend on the child. Like I said, I typically have my conferences October or November and then February or March. So for some students, I'll just have a couple. For some, it will be monthly. So it's just going to depend on what that child and that parent need. But regardless, make sure that you have a binder or a folder where you are keeping your documentation. I just keep mine in a binder. Perhaps your school is very specific on how they want you to keep documentation. I have had students with very difficult behavior at the beginning of the school year, so I will just have a notebook where I write down the date and then the time of when the bad behavior occurred, and I will talk to the parent after school and address it. So I might say, I noticed that Sammy has been taking my Lego blocks and putting them in his pocket to take home. I know that he really likes playing with them, but these are classroom materials and they need to stay in the classroom. Can you please talk to him about not taking my things home? So if you are seeing unacceptable behaviors, I would write them down and address them immediately with the parent. Sometimes the kids behave better with the parent and they really test boundaries with their teachers, but having that parent communication and parent support, informing them of their child's progress or concerns, and working together as a team ultimately helps that child be successful. And that is it for my 5 parent-teacher conference tips. I really hope that they were helpful to you, and if so, please take a second to hit that like button if you haven't already. Subscribe for my future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!